Alright, so this is part 2 of the video tutorial series for my recently released 3D accessory tool for nba2K19 on PC. And we're going to basically jump right in here, since in part 1 we went over all the important information of setting up the tool, of saving the directory in the appropriate place, naming the files, and a general idea of how to use the tool. But in this part, in part 2 here, we're going to be all of this information that I said to disregard in the first video. That's what we're going to be going over. And I have 5 examples prepared, one for each of these cases here, one for each of these categories, and an additional one for case number 1 because I received some requests to show how to apply the bandana that's included with the tool. And so I have these 5 examples ready to go, and I'll be walking through them just like I did with the face mask in part 1, although I'll be moving a little bit quicker through them since we already went over a lot of stuff in part 1. So, and secondly, as we go through these examples, in fact, in the first example here, you will get to see where this Blender add-on comes in and why it's necessary. And I'll be able to walk you through how to install it, how to enable it, and you'll get to see how it's used. Because already in this first example, this first example here, we're adding 3D hair from a separate file to the main highhead.scene file and model file for the player. While we still, in case number 1, we don't need to fill in any of this information. We still just press submit. But after the fact, there's an extra step that involves the Blender add-on that you run into. And so right here in example 1, you'll get a chance to see more about this Blender add-on here. And so let's just go ahead and jump right in. I've got the source file renamed. Don't need to rename the player's file. Got both of these. This is important for the tool, not for the tool, for the Blender add-on as well. It is important that you get the scene file for each of these and the model file into the directory here. You'll see why in a second. But for now, before we use the tool, I'm gonna do what we do, just like we did for the face mask, which we need to get the contents of the material and trim sections here, so that once we've applied the hair with the tool, the scene file will reflect those changes. All right, delete this extra line, we don't need that. Save, let's go ahead and run the tool. Actually, it's already open. I had that up here in the beginning, just for display purposes to show you these cases, but I'm going to go ahead and exit out of the tool and open it up again just so it the changes are seen by the tool. And so since I added these files in here while the tool was open, I'm going to go ahead and just restart the tool. So pretty straightforward still, like the face mask. Just press submit and OK, and you're done. And now I'm going to just drag this edited scene file into the exported new folder so that we can go ahead and check it out in Blender. And when we do that, you will see, at first you will see, okay, the 3D hair looks just like just like it does in the separate file. It seems like everything's okay here. I can see the hair at the bottom of the regular vertex groups, but when you scroll down and when you go into the UV image editor, that's when you start to see that there's going to be another step needed. And you may already be able to tell, but when I just select the hair here, you will see that when I go ahead and import the original hair scene file, the separate file that we used, you will see that the UV map coordinates are way off. They're stretched out and everything. So look right here, all confined into this grid neatly. And then in the exported file, you'll see that they are way stretched out. And that's where this Blender add-on comes in. Its sole purpose is essentially to rescale, because that's what it takes to get this to get these UV coordinates back to their original place and scale. You would have to go in and scale them manually every time, and then have to play around and try to get it positioned exactly how it is in the original file here. And while that's doable, it's pretty tedious, and so I went ahead and developed a script that automates that. And so this basically does all the work for you as far as getting it back to its original coordinates here. It does the rescaling, and then it gets it confined into this grid like it should be. And you'll see in a second, all you have to do at that point is the scaling's done. So after that, it's really easy just to nudge it a little bit left or right, depending on how it looks and everything. So basically, all you have to do is just translate it or move it positionally, and I'll show you. It's really easy to do when the scaling is already perfect like it should be. And so that's what this tool does. And now I'm going to go ahead and get that installed and enabled. User preferences, user, install add-on from file, and we're going to go right to the drive where the home folder is, the user home folder. Find the tools directory, and right in this folder that says Blender add-on, there should be a zip file that is that contains the Blender add-on. And so you can just click right on that zip file, and it should install. Right here, you should see modules installed, and then it should enable. Go ahead and just save user settings so it'll stay on. And now that we have it enabled here, there's a brief description here if you want to look at it. Now that we have it enabled, now let's make sure we can see it, because it shows up as a button. And here it is right here. So we're not in edit mode yet, and it's only visible in edit mode. But here you can see this 2K3D UV restore panel. And what I would recommend doing is just, since you likely will be using this area with the vertex groups and selecting and whatnot whenever you're using the tool, especially if you have to fill information in and check geometry information as outlined in the tools interface, just drag it right under this vertex groups panel here, so that now whenever you go into edit mode, you should see basically it's really simple. Just it has some instructions. Basically, just only select only the vertex groups of the accessory. So in this case, of the 3D hair. So you just deselect everything, make sure nothing else is selected, select just the hair, and then just click this button. That's all you gotta do. And so don't worry if you see stuff disappear here. It's only being hidden so that the tool only just hides the geometry. So you just press Alt H. It just hides everything else to isolate it and make sure that no other parts of the model get messed with the UV maps and everything. So everything else should look the exact same. But all you have to do is just go into the 3D view here and just press Alt H. Everything should come back because you press H, Alt H. And so back to the hair part. So you will now see that we'll see if it's exactly where it needs to be, but you should see that the scale is spot on. And you don't necessarily have to be super exact about this. If you don't want to mess with it and get like super precise with it and it looks good from a distance, that's totally up to you. But in my case, I really like to make sure it's like exactly right, because little things can make a difference in the textures, but there are times when it just doesn't really show up that much in game. So you may be able to just click this button and just use it without messing with it. But so what I like to do is go ahead and select all here. Oops, not that. In the UV image editor, select all to highlight it so that I can move its position if I need to. And so just what I do is, you can do this with any corner, any like outer part. So like whatever the farthest right or left point is of the thing. So like over here, this is the bottom right of these coordinates here. And so basically all you're doing is, this is how you can keep track of where you may need to position it, is you go into the original separate hair scene file and just right on that dot, zoom in as far as you can, right on that dot, left click, and your cursor will you'll mark your cursor there, so that now when you go into the file that was edited by the accessory tool, now you can see exactly how much, if any, moving you need to do. In this case, it's like not even a full pixel, but it is something. And so it should just line up with these two lines here, going up and then sideways here. So literally all I'm going to do here is I'm going to press G to translate it or move it, press X to do it on the X-axis, Shift to make sure I do it in like small little increments, and I'm just going to move it till it lines up right, and then just check one more time to refer to it. And again, you don't have to be this precise, but just because I want to, make sure you don't, I had to cancel, I was about to scale something up here. Make sure your mouse is hovering over the UV image editor and not the 3D view, because you'll actually make changes to the size of the hair. But so that just happened to me and I had to cancel it. But what you'll see is it's just about there. I mean, I could, if I was just doing this and I wasn't doing this in a video, I would probably go in and like nudge it over a tiny little bit to get exactly lined up. But I mean, for all intents and purposes, this is where it needs to be. So you can just you can click between them and press tab to go into edit mode to check. But now you should see that it is exactly where it needs to be. So now this resolves the issue, and this is the step that has to happen, that I was referring to, the step that you need to take afterwards. after applying the accessory with the tool. And this happens in instances where you have a separate file for the accessory because, and I'll show you real quick in the scene files, what this tool does is there's these coordinates in the vertex format section of the scene files for these things. You will see that if I go back here, I might still have them open in here. Yeah. So if you go to the vertex format area, you don't need to like look into it too much, but just at a glance, if you look at these numbers and you go to text chord 0 and you look at the offset and scale and highlight them, you will see that these numbers are quite different. And so basically this is just like, it contributes to how it shows up in Blender and like the overall scale, like how far it's stretched out and stuff. So it's going from these smaller values where it's just confined in one grid, like all 3D accessories are in that little grid that you could see, but the UV coordinates are stretched all over, like 6-7 grids worth wide, and so that's what gets the scaling all messed up. And all this tool does is goes into these scene files. That's why it's so important that you drag the scene files along with the model files that you'll be using to apply the 3D accessory, because it takes these numbers, reads them, and it calculates, and then it makes the necessary adjustments to fix the scaling. And as I said, then all you got to do, the scaling should be perfect, so you don't have to worry about having to resize it and worrying about that, because that's what makes it really tedious if you have to resize it and position it. But this gets the resizing of it done, and it gets it within this grid like it should be. And then it's like you saw, like I moved it like maybe like a half a pixel over, and that was all. So it does 99% of the work for you. And when you just mark it with your cursor like this, it makes it real easy. You just line it up. And so that's enough about that. But so that in essence is that's where the Blender add-on becomes important. You'll run into this issue, as I said, with separate files, and you'll see that those coordinates are different in the scene files. And that's the case when it is a separate file for the accessory. But when you get an accessory, when we're just about to get into it, when you get an accessory from another player's file where the accessory is at the end of the player's file, like for example, if you're getting glasses or goggles that you see listed at the end of another player's files, you actually don't have this issue. You have to type stuff in and you have to check something in Blender real quick, but you don't have to worry about this scaling issue because the coordinates are about the same. So that's just a little bit of background, just going forward here. But okay, so now that I've touched on that a bit, now let's go ahead and actually look in game, make sure it looks right in game. So I'm going to go to this folder here. Oh yeah, I should also make sure I include this in the steps, is this file that we were messing with and that we imported and used the tool on, or used the Blender add-on with, and then we positioned. We just need to go ahead and export that file with this updated UV map. And the only difference is going to be just the fixed UV map that you saw there. And I'm just going to export this to just create a random new folder in here real quick. Export it there so we can drag that into the game. Make sure I have the right file selected in the import dialog. Should be, no wait, exported new, there we go. Export that. All right, let's check it out in game. Got the modded folder over here, or the modded archive here, the PNG archive for Simmons here. Drag this scene file over, drag this updated file, not the one that's in the exported new, but whatever folder, wherever you export from Blender. So got that switched over there. All right, let's check it out in game. You should see that the hair is just like it was. It shows up just like it did initially. And I'm not going to do like the before and after screens and everything, just to keep the time down a little bit. But you can see that after doing this and after bringing these files into the modded folder, with these files, the hair looks like it should, and it looks just like the default files. And so that is the first example there. And now that we got into the Blender add-on, now we can get through the second one a little bit quicker. So I'm going to clear out these files again here in the tools directory. Gonna exit out of that. All right. So now the second example for case one. This is the bandana. And so this is going to follow pretty much the exact same process. Only difference is just there's other files that you drag in along with the updated files. Like there's just more files that you drag into the modded folder that accompany these the updated scene and model files. So you're not making any changes to those files. There's just more stuff you bring in to the modded folder because of the nature of the accessory, and you'll see in a second. So we've got Clink Capella default files, and then we've got the bandana, the regular bandana that comes with the tool. And so we're going to do the same thing here. Oops. All right. Oops, I have these backwards. Arrange them this way. Okay, it doesn't want to let me do that, so whatever. I was going to have this one on the right, but who cares? So same thing, and you'll see that it's called the hair shell shader, and like the hair shell, you'll see that the some of the files that accompany it in the modded folder, they say hair shell, and that's just a naming convention. I posted about this recently on my thread when someone asked about the bandana, and let me see here. Okay, so why is that there? I think I have the wrong scene file here. Because he shouldn't have 3D hair already. This might be the old one. Excuse me, sorry about that. Make sure I have the right files in here. Got the bandana scene file. And this guy here. Oh, I guess I didn't reload the file. It asked me if I wanted to reload it. But nevertheless, got these files in here. Make sure I actually load this file this time. A new file. There we go. That's what it should be. Okay. So hair shell shader, same thing, material prim sections. Create a line for it. Make sure there's a space between the colon and the cursor. Go down to here, create a space for it. And you'll see that there are two vertex groups for this. There are multiple vertex groups. It's split into multiple vertex groups, just like the face mask was, for ease of fit and helping you get it custom fit to your player. So paste. Again, get rid of that. Save. All right, let's run the tool. And yeah, so the only thing that'll be different here is you'll see that you might see a file or two that just gets dragged in that you don't recognize, but it's the exact same thing as far as using a tool. Check it in Blender real quick. So it will show up in Blender, but there are just like dragging some different files that you need to have certain files in there for it to show up in the game. Because it'll show up in Blender with just a 3D aspect of it, but when it comes to showing up with the correct textures in the game and being visible, it requires certain files. But in Blender, it should just be the same as with the hair. It should show up normal. Go ahead and delete these guys. All right. Okay, so there we go. I just click Capella with a bandana. And what we should see is the same exact thing with this bandana here as with the hair, where everything else looks fine in the UV map, but when you select the bandana, actually, I don't know why I did that. Okay. When you select the bandana vertex groups, all those related to the bandana, you will now see that it's the same kind of thing where they're all stretched out. So auto transform, select it. Let's go get the separate file for the bandana real quick. Or no, wait, go to. Okay, here we go. Highlight it, and let's do the same thing with the cursor here. And again, you can be as exact as you want about this, but I would recommend at least like giving it one little move along the x-axis or y if needed. Repositioning it a little bit. You don't have to like zoom all the way in and like get it to the exact like millimeter or whatever, but I would recommend at least doing that once afterward, because it is fairly easy if you just use the cursor to mark where it should be. And in this case, the tool actually got it exactly where it needs to be. So that does happen sometimes. Well, not exactly. You can see that it might be like a teeny bit, but like I said, I would do this if I were just doing a mod here, but I would, go the extra mile. But for the sake of time, I'm not gonna do the whole 9 yards here and get super picky about this. But you can see that from a distance, at least, the tool gets it exactly where it needs to be. And so go ahead and export that. Create another folder here just to hold it. Oh wait, this is the import folder. Oh, okay, yeah. New folder here. Make sure we have the correct import file here. All right. And there's the error. So this is where I wasn't sure if this would do this error, because I've been running into the same error when I'm doing the Ninja headband, where I'm using part of one of these bandanas as a base, but for whatever reason, I'm getting this error when doing the UV maps, specifically with the bandanas, and it seems to just happen sometimes inexplicably, is even though this UV map is right and it shouldn't be like it shouldn't be like mismatched with the rest of the UV coordinates in any way for whatever reason. So I'm trying everything. Like everything else, like it doesn't look like it's out of place. It's scaled correctly and everything. For whatever reason, it it'll let me use the tool and it will let me get it all lined up and everything. But when it comes time to import it, I get this stupid error that I've been trying to get to the bottom of, and it just doesn't. That's basically the more complicated part that I said I'm still in progress of working on. And so this is still a work in progress. What I've been doing is I've been making adjustments to the Blender add-on I'm potentially looking to, because right now we're making these changes in Blender, in the UV image editor, and then we're exporting via the original Blender add-on for the Blender importer exporter script. But what I've been trying to do is potentially, if it may just be some kind of little technical thing with this exporter, the export function on this tool, I've been looking into doing the exact same thing, but doing it directly to the file. So as opposed to like doing it in Blender, exporting, then the changes are saved, like have the button there just like it was, or just like it is here, but instead it's doing these things straight to the file of wherever that model file is. So that's kind of in the works right now, but hopefully I can get to the bottom of this, because not just for these bandanas here, but for the the ninja headband that I've been working on for a good while now. I get it to look right in a 3D sense, and then I get just like this kind of thing. I get it all looking how I want to, and I'm happy with 3D edit. And then I get in here, I use the tool. Oh, great. Okay, it looks good. The UV map is fixed, and then I export and I get this stupid error. But hopefully that will get resolved. So what this means for the in-game aspect of it is you will still see the bandana. It'll still be there, but it will be with the distorted UV map. It will not have the fixed UV map. So the texture is going to not appear right. It's going to appear kind of stretched and all that. So, but at least, if you want to see it, if you want to at least see it applied and see it in some way, it shouldn't be game ready or picturesque yet, but we can just throw it in there, just see how it looks without it. And so I have the hi-hat scene file and the model file just from the exported new, not the attempted exported file from Blender. And drag those in, and then I'm going to go back to where I have the default archives here with the accessory, and I'm going to go ahead and grab that. What am I looking for? Oh, yeah, duh. This is in the directory for the tool. So we got accessories, other accessories, Bandana regular. Okay, so here you go. So what I was referring to with the files is you'll see like hair shell tangent files, and then hair shell color files, and a model file. And it might seem a little weird in that sense, but it's only because of how the default files have it packaged. While it is a 3D accessory and it does show up on the player, for whatever reason they have it packaged like with the hair. So the textures for the hair, you also see the bandana texture, and it's not set up the same way of like some of the other stuff you'll see. But just drag these files in, and the reason for the hair shell just specifically is it's just a way to present it to the game in a way that like the hair shell has these same files as the it has the same format, or the same format as the regular hair tangent hair color that comes with it. But what I've noticed in 2K19 as opposed to 2K18 is I barely see any hair shell files. I haven't seen nearly as much as I did in 2K18. So, and even if there is one, you can just delete it. And so you basically this is your custom textures for the hair shell. And at that point, the hair shell is just another global shader that you can use and that you can put in your scene file. And so that's why it's in here. In here. So at that point, the game doesn't know any different. It thinks that, okay, this is just the textures for the hair shell. But we packaged in there, we have the bandana. So let's go ahead and check it out in game. And so yeah, it let's just say it doesn't look right. That'd be putting it nicely, but it's all stretched out, and so you can see, you can imagine after seeing it in Blender and seeing how stretched out it was, as opposed to the textures which are confined into that little grid, you could see how things are not quite right here. But you at least do see that some semblance of bandana shows up. And so yeah, that's an incomplete application of the bandana that is still being worked on, and I hope to get that resolved as soon as I can. So okay, now we'll get to the part where we get into more of the details of like typing different stuff into the tool, and introduce you to that process. So hopefully we shouldn't encounter any more errors at this point. And now that I've gone over the Blender add-on and all that, we should be able to move through these last three a lot quicker. So, oops. All right, paste to clear out these files in here. I guess it's open in Blender or something. All right. Okay, so another request I had was to show an example of how you can add glasses from another player's cyberface. And so now we're moving to case number 2. And what I have here is I have Horace Grant, his default files. He has like these custom glasses in his see, look, glasses custom in his files. So it's packaged with the player, and so that's the source, and then the destination for that the glasses is another player's file. So this will introduce you to the second case here. So I've got Horace Grant will be the source, and that's the file that'll get renamed to source from. And I'm just going to, actually, I don't think I need to do that. I'm just because they're both named hi-hat.scene for the, since they're player files, I'm just going to rename this to something else so that I can get them both in there. And then I'll rename that as it should be. All right, and same thing here. Get rid of this other stuff. All right, and just need to open up this other one, I guess. The main one. Okay. All right, so same thing. It's just going to have more stuff here because it's the player's file. And you will see an extra one of these vertex groups here at the bottom of these normal ones that you always see, like arms, torso, hidden legs, eyes, blah, blah, blah. Or at the very bottom, you will see a different one, and that's the one you want right there. And you don't need to, since it doesn't have that extra line with the triangle listing, you don't have to worry about deleting that. So you are good to go. Use the tool. And so let's open the tool just to have it open, and so we can go into Blender and do what we need to do. So if you see at the bottom here, you'll see that what you're doing, and I delved into this a little bit in the first video, is that what you're doing when you're providing this information, in look, case 2, so we're filling in this left box. So we're telling the tool where this accessory starts in the file, because it's at the end of the file instead of being in its separate file where you're just copying all the contents. You're basically just giving the tool the exact cutoff point where, okay, this is the end of Horace Grant as the player, his files or his geometry data for his player. This is where the accessory begins that I want to copy over. So the vast majority of the time, your numbers here are going to be, this is, as far as I know, this is the most common geometry data for 2K19 players. Vertex count of 18657. And this is referring to the entire model selected and then deselecting the 3D accessory. So you're just saying this is the cutoff point. So it has more after this number, but you're telling it the cutoff. So what it almost always is 18657 for the vertex count, 32115 for the face count. And I will double check that just because you definitely want to make sure. Go into Horace Grant's file, the source here, select everything, go down to this unfamiliar vertex group here, the different one, deselect that, and you will see, like I thought, 18657 vertices, 32115 faces. So those are the numbers that you need. So we can go ahead with it. We can apply the accessory with the tool. And let's go ahead and check it out in Blender real quick. And what you should see is that in this case now, this add-on will not be necessary. when we import the updated file here. So what you see is now you see Paul Pierce, who definitely did not have these classes before, and you will see the glasses applied to Paul Pierce successfully. And if you go in, you won't see any weird stuff stretched out here in the background. And if you look at it closely, you will see that it's as it should be. It's confined into this grid, and it's not all wacky as far as the scale. So you don't have to export or do anything here. This is just to check it in Blender. So now we're going to go ahead and copy over these files as well as some other files that go with it into Horace Grant's, into Paul Pierce's files in the modded folder. So here we are. Drag these in. I'm going to go back to where I originally have like the default PNG archive stored. And so I have Horace Grant. All right, so I got Horace Grant's original PNG archive here. And I believe that's Concabella's. Let me go back, make sure I found the right one here. I believe maybe it's 1735. Yeah, there it is. Okay. So in this case, the way it's presented to the game, it's through the glasses custom shader. And that's basically when like there are glasses and goggles, like actual preset, like default files, like different types of goggles, like Kareem's goggles and Horace Grant's. But what you can do is you can signify to the, or you can indicate to the game that, hey, I have these files. These are custom files. And if you say custom shader, you can include textures. And then when you do this with a 3D accessory that's not through the hair shell, like we did previously, you need this body material binding .CBND. And so you just need these textures that say glasses, and then you also need this body material binding here. So once we copy that over, should see Paul Pierce with glasses on. And I chose him to apply these two because I just thought it'd be a nice reward for his very brilliant prediction in the Milwaukee-Boston series, where he called series after one game. When the Celtics were up 1-0, I just thought that was really funny. So here you go, Paul Pierce. Here's some glasses. All right, next case here. Got two more left here. All right, and so now this is another. This is going to be another new thing, kind of. It's not going to be like. It's not really that much different of a. It's not a different process per se, but what you will see is that you just use you just use a different file, and if you wondered why in the directory for the tool, why you see this file labeled EMPTY.model, this is where that file comes in. Let me delete these real quick. So you see in accessories, you see global accessories, and you see empty. And you may ask, what does empty mean? It looks like there's stuff in there. And so basically, this file, it looks the exact same way as far as like all the section headers that the tool uses to read through. This is basically like a file that just got like, it has just the headers that the tool reads through. And in any other file, it will tell you like the section length. Like the section length is 5,600 or something. So read that many bytes or whatever. But in this case, it has these headers, and all it says is just section length of 0. So it's basically just it's used as a way to remove an accessory in this case. So there is a way, without applying another accessory or um, without having to do it manually or anything like that. This is how you remove an accessory. So the example I have is, this is the exact same Drew Holiday with the face mask applied, that I did in part 1, and say that this is like my personal side of the face. Maybe I'm using him in like my career or something, and I've put like a bunch of work into this face, um, beyond the face mask, like actual edits to the face and the head shape and all that, and um, and all of a sudden I don't want the mask anymore, but I want to preserve the edits that I have. I want that cyber face that I had, that I have without the mask. Um, and so this is your way to just go back to how it was originally, where he did not have the mask, and it's just his 3D body in that file. So I'm going to go ahead and copy this. I'm thinking of it. So in this case, there is no scene file that comes with it. And what you're doing to the main hi-hat file, you're just, instead of like pasting in, you're deleting parts of the scene file that you don't want there anymore. So I'm going to go ahead and Control-C to copy that and paste it into here. And this empty.model, I'm going to rename to source.model, or source_model. No, sorry. Source underscore from .model. No scene file needed. And then for the player it's applying to, or the player that's having the accessory removed, we're going to go ahead and copy his files in. And we're going to go in and we're going to find where we added these lines in the file. Originally, to apply the face mask, we're going to just basically undo all that. So this line 15 here was added for the face mask. We're going to delete that and go back up here, delete the comma so it indicates the end of this category here, and then make sure there's a space between the colon and the cursor, and then do the same thing in the prim section, which is just delete all of these things that say face mask shader, and make sure you leave it like this, where there's under it there's a curly bracket without a comma, and then tabbed over to the left on the next line down is a curly bracket and a comma. So this is how it originally was. So save that, and let's go ahead and run the tool. And so in this case, this is only the right box that's getting filled in. So the source of the 3D accessory, we're not putting anything. We're just saying, like, and this is not, this case is not exclusively for removing an accessory like this. Like, if this was another accessory, like if this was, I don't know, like a pair, like if it was the do-rag that's included with the files, it would just add this, the 3D accessory in, because instead of a section length of 0 and having nothing to copy over and just replacing the section with nothing, it would replace with whatever it has for the 3D accessory. But this is just, I wanted to show this because this is the method to remove a 3D accessory. So it's not, this case number 3 is not limited to using this in the EMPTY.model and removing an accessory, but it is, I thought it would be a good example to show. So again, if I had a do-rag, I would be saying just copy that whole do-rag accessory that's a separate accessory and then start pasting in that same data at this point. So just like we said, at what point does the 3D accessory start in this left box? We're saying at what point do we want to begin writing in that accessory. So by default, if you just leave it blank, it just appends it or adds it to the end. But when this write box comes into play is when you want to overwrite, or in this case, remove something. So if you wanted to, if you had a pair of, or if you had like a snapback cat accessory on your player, and you're like, you know what, I want to just switch that out for a do-rag. I don't want to have to like do separate times where I remove it and then add it. So you would just leave this blank, and then you would, wherever in your player that you start at, or that you do the same thing where you go to where the accessory starts. Let's find it real quick. Right here. So it's True Holiday. So this is from the last video where we left off, where he has the mask applied. So go in, and just like you did with the source of the 3D accessory, select everything and just deselect the vertex groups that involve the 3D accessory. So you're basically saying at this point, like after the 3D body data is through, as soon as this data starts for the accessory here at the end, let's just overwrite that, as opposed to just doing it at the end, and you'd have a face mask and or you'd have whatever accessory you have on there plus the additional one. But in this case, you're saying, okay, cut off here, right after this point in the geometry, after the entire original model is laid out. Let's go ahead and start writing here so that we can just overwrite this directly. So, and unsurprisingly, it's the same numbers, which it will be a lot of the time, although it will vary. Some players, 18657 for the vertex count, 32115 for the face count. And so again, not the left box this time, it's just the right box. And we'll do 657, 32115, press apply, okay. Or wait, I'm just gonna, for the purpose of showing you what it looks like in the, I forgot to stop and show you the console screen that gives you an indication that it removed an accessory, and it basically just telling you that it picked up on that you're removing an accessory, not trying to apply one. So I'm just going to be doing the same thing, just overwriting whatever files in the exported new, just for the sake of showing you guys. Okay, so I'm not going to press OK right away this time. Okay, so usually you just see, if you type in one of these boxes, you see user input and either accessory, user input in parentheses, accessory, or player. You'll see what you typed in there. And then you will see basically just this little section here where it says, you'll see like you'll see an inputted range, like you'll see the original range of the vertex IDs for, well, I don't want to make it sound more complicated than it is, but you'll see some numbers that are inputted for both the accessory and the player. You'll see a number here usually that's inputted, and then you'll see an updated number once the tool is calculated what it needs to do, and you'll see a range at the end, which is basically like, okay, we had this offset because this separate accessory started at 0, just like, and that would clash with the player's vertex IDs. It started at 0, and we gave it this offset, and so now the accessory's vertex IDs start at 18657 after the player ends. But in this case, you will see up here. You have chosen to remove an accessory, no offset. So you won't see a plus whatever number for the offset, and you won't see a number here for where it says accessory. It will read empty. So this is just a way to confirm, like, okay, the tool picked up on the fact that I want to remove an accessory. I'm not applying an accessory. So I just thought I'd go over that real quick. And so let's go ahead, check that out in Blender as well. And obviously with this one, it's the same as the last one in that you won't have to worry about the UV map thing because all you're doing is deleting information. So it should show up, but now you'll see that there's no face mask here. There's no trace of it. There's no vertex group for it, no nothing. So now if you put a bunch of time and work into this face for Drew Holiday and you thought you wanted a face mask and then you made a bunch of edits to it, saved it, and all of a sudden you don't want that face mask and you want to preserve all the work you did on it while keeping the rest of the file the same, this is how you do that. So there he is in his original form without the face mask. Okay, last example here. And in this case, we will be filling out both of the boxes. So this is an example with goggles here. And so I have Kurt Rambis and James Worthy's default files. Both of them are files, the highhead.c and model file. So that's both the source and the destination are a player's files, in which the accessory is at the end. So this is where, where basically you want to overwrite, you want to get a 3D accessory that's from a player's file, but you also want to overwrite the desired accessory that's originally with the player you're applying it to, if that makes any sense. So instead of being a separate file on either side, now you're taking what's at the end of one file and you're placing what's at the end of the destination file. And yeah, so that will require that we fill in both boxes and basically just specify the cutoff for where that accessory starts in both files. So delete these again. All right, so the goal here is to go, basically we're swapping out Kurt Rambis, his goggles, we're swapping them onto James Worthy. So we're replacing James Worthy's goggles with Kurt Rambis's. So Kurt Rambis would be the source. So again, just like previously, when it's two players file, or when it's a player's file, that's the source. I'm just going to go ahead and just rename it to something else so that it won't see it as a duplicate. Rename this file source _ from.model Worthy. Get his files in here. Going to make the appropriate, make sure there's not a bunch of stuff here. Just exit out of whatever else is in Notepad. All right, let's open these. Do the same thing, except now on both sides, you will see that it's at the end of a longer list of stuff. So it's at the very end of these sections, the normal sections that you see with a player, with all the arms, torso, hidden legs, and all that. So on both ends of it. And so now instead of pasting in and like copying in or creating space for something, now you're pasting over. So you're going to Control C to copy that, go over this here, highlight it, paste over. Same thing here at the bottom, or in the prim section. And so in this case, you're just going to highlight these 3 lines here, copy, paste them over these, and now it should be the same in the prim and the material section for the goggles here. Save that. Let's run the tool, and I will go ahead and double check the geometry stuff for Worthy and Rambus just in case. Because if it's not the same as I'm anticipating, then things will very quickly get out of hand. Just being off by 1 vertex or face, and your guy will be like big giant triangles, or like flying around everywhere. Like, you won't recognize the player. That's the amount of a difference that can cause the entire model to get messed up. So we'll go back to here. Let's check Rambus. Select all, deselect 18657, 32115. So the typical geometry data for Rambus. Let's go to Worthy, make sure that he is the typical as well. 2007. Deselect. Okay, and same thing. So it just so happens that all the players that I use in these examples do have the most common geometry data here, which is, as I said earlier, you will see variation. Like, most will have this face count and most will have this vertex count, but there also will be some that have the same face count, but like 1, 2, 3 vertices more or less. And then I think there's one other common vertex count that's like 18,700 something, and has a higher face count along with that. But for the most part, you will see this data here. So I'm just gonna type the exact same thing on both sides here. Tab over 657 15. All right, apply. And in this case, you don't see an offset at all because obviously their information was the same up into the accessory. So now it's just a different accessory at the end, but there's no change in the vertex IDs there. So okay, test in Blender real quick, export it new, and I will keep these guys in here so that we can see. Well, I'll keep James Worthy in here so that you can see, you can compare his goggles before and after. All right, let's go. All right, import. All right, so what you'll see now is you see that there's 2 glasses happening here, or goggles. So, oh wait, sorry. This is the original. That's the new one with the different goggles. Nothing else changes. And then if you go to the UV map again, because of the situation, it's not from a separate file, it's from the end of a player's file. You will not see anything funky going on in the UV maps. Will not need that tool. And I guess if you want to double check, just make sure, okay, look, it looks normal. It's in this little square grid here, and there's no weird stretching going on. So no extra step necessary there. So finally, let's go ahead and test this last example in game. Take a look at it. Actually, we're going to need to go to here. Okay. And again, these goggles are global accessories. So, like the face mask, you will see that you don't need to have extra texture files or the CBND file or anything. You just need to have the 3D changes to these files, and then you just change what the shader is, because that shader tells the game, okay, this global texture is what I want applied to this. So we change that, and we have the 3D edits. So without any extra files, we should see it show up in game as predicted. And there you go. James Worthy with different goggles/glasses. And I believe I forgot to show in game Drew Holiday earlier. And so I never dragged it in the modded folder, just for you to see. There's him with the goggles. And if I go back and I'll have to get my recycle bin real quick. So if we go back to the last file here, this one here, this is his exported file here. So we'll restore that, and we will restore this as well. Overwrite the file there. And just for the sake of seeing it, I'll go ahead and copy these in. Okay, now he should not have goggles anymore. And there you go. So yeah, I forgot to show him earlier, but I just thought I would at the end just to be consistent here. But so yeah, that is all 5 examples of using the tool to apply 3D accessory, and that is all the different cases of use that the tool has that you see in the interface of the tool. And also we went over the Blender add-on, so that should be familiar to you now. And I know it might not make a whole lot of sense just because of the incomplete part with the bandana and how there's still stuff in the works, but outside of the bandanas, if you're doing that for hair or some other accessory like the do-rag or whatever, you do that same process and you don't run into that error. The problem seems to be specifically with the bandanas. And thus, because they're used as a base for the Ninja headband, also the Ninja headband. So hopefully you will at least now be prepared to use the Blender add-on and get it all set up for accessories outside of the bandanas. And hopefully it makes sense to you now as far as what situations require what amount of user input, and the steps taken. And so I hope this helped, and this is the end of part 2.